Welcome to Slow News Day with Kevin Clark. I'm Kevin Clark. Woo! Playoff time, man. We can't go with a small teacup. Are you joking me? 2021 cars. You getting a new car anytime soon?
No, I need to because it's been about 3 years and I change cars like I change clothes. True story.
Emmanuel Acho, former NFL player, current Fox Sports 1 host, best-selling New York Times author. Anything you're not involved in at this point?
I guess this conversation, but we'll check that off the list here shortly.
I want to start with football. You played on the Browns. You played on the 2012 Browns. Is playing for the Browns in that era, and that era being any Brown season before this year, is it as bad as everybody says?
It is definitely challenging. I'm telling you, the Browns football and Browns football in general, it should be graded on a curve. Right. Remember when you were in middle school and that one kid in the class got like the 75? I was that one kid. But the average was like a 90. And I just wait for the teacher to say, but we're going to curve it because, the median of the average was too low. The Browns should be graded on a curve because of how difficult it is in that city to win. Shout out to Baker Mayfield and these Cleveland Browns for finding a way to make it to the playoffs.
Do you have a story where you say, oh, wow, this Cleveland thing, it's a little bit of a different organization than the way most things are handled?
Yeah. So people have to understand losing is a habit, just like winning is a habit. I got to Cleveland 2012. I was coming from the University of Texas. Back when Texas was at the top, I get to Cleveland. We had a great day of off-season team activities. And our coach brings us up, all the men into the huddle, fists raised, and he gathers us all together. He says, "Men, that was one heck of a practice. If we practice like that all season long, if we practice perfect like that, we'll look up, we'll be 12-4, we'll be 13-3. I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. If we're perfect, you're still telling us that we're going to lose? Nobody really caught that. But because I was a rookie coming from a program in which I rarely lost the majority of my early years, I heard that wait a second. No, if we practice like that, you should say we're going undefeated. Well, the next day, that head coach, he called us all up and he apologized. But Kevin, it was too late. At the point in which you told us all, even if we're perfect, we're still going to lose, I realized, man, we have a losing culture.
And the losing culture lasted 18 years. So let's go big picture here. If you owned a team right now and you're hiring a coach, you have an open. We know what the trends are in this league. We know it's been offensive minds, skews younger the last couple of years. Is there something, if you were an owner, you'd be looking for in a head coach that maybe most owners don't look for? And by the way the book sales are going, you might, I'm just saying, it can't be long now.
I'll say it like this. Number one is I would want to look for that offensive guru that followed the tutelage of Andy Reid, i.e. Eric Bieniemy. I would want to look there. Or I'd want to look at a coach who's never, ever failed on the field. Right. And a guy like Urban Meyer. If you've never failed, then I'm going to take my chances with your inability to fail. Talk about unstoppable force meets immovable object.
Speaking of putting you in positions of power, if you became commissioner tomorrow, what's priority number one for you? What do you change?
I think the first thing I'm going to change is the playoff format. Why is a 7-9 Washington team hosting a playoff game versus an 11-5 Buccaneers team? The NFL playoffs are a reward for quality performance in the regular season. I would still make sure that all divisions are represented. So I would make sure that the division winner gets a playoff seed, but I would not necessarily let them host.
Were you upset at what the Eagles did last night?
I wasn't, because what am I upset at? Am I upset at them pulling Jalen Hurts, who was had 17 points in his last 20 drives, 25 for 56 in his last 20 drives, 44% completion percentage? Am I mad that they pulled Jalen Hurts when you could argue he deserved to be pulled? We are upset by the outcome and not the action. If Nate Sudfeld, who replaced Jalen Hurts, would have played well, nobody would be up in arms right now.
Also, the 6-10 Giants not making it, I think we're going to be okay. If you could start a conversation, you could snap your fingers and everybody's talking about this for a week, it becomes the national story, what would you bring to the forefront? What conversation would you start if you could?
I would probably bring up the lack of Black ownership, the lack of Black management, or the lack of Black head coaches. If the players are 77% Black on average, then how come there are only 3 to 5 Black head coaches annually? I would bring up the fact that, typically speaking, it's not a meritocracy, the NFL. It's based upon nepotism. You hire your family, and cronyism, you hire your friends. It's going to be interesting, though, Kevin, because look at it this year. You're talking about 5 to 6 head coaching vacancies. It will be very interesting to see who's hired, who's interviewed, who's auditioned, etc.
If you could put a plan in place to try to change that, where would you start? Because every year I hear from owners or GMs or whatever, well, there aren't enough, the pipeline, you don't know enough quarterback coaches who are minorities, whatever. And it's like, well, then start somewhere. I mean, it seems like we just get in this cycle and it never seems to get any better. If you were to put a plan in place, where do you start?
I would honestly start with incentivization. You know, that's faced backlash from both black and white people. But you got to remember, people aren't going to change unless you incentivize them to, a la the Rooney Rule. So I actually didn't mind the rule that proposed third round picks, et cetera, would be granted to teams that hired minority coaches at different levels on their staff, management, coordinating, head coaches, et cetera. Because sometimes people need incentive to change. I don't think that the NFL's attempt is misguided or miscalculated. I actually think it's wise.
You have a psychology degree from Texas, which I find extremely fascinating. It could be a whole organization, it could be a coach, could be a quarterback. If you could just dive into the mind of anybody right now, total honesty, where do you go?
Chicago Bears, Mitch Trubisky.
Oh, wow.
I think that Mitch is one of the most underutilized, unknown players in the league. Yeah. Think about Josh Allen his first year. We said Josh Allen was terrible. First year only had about 10 or so. He was in the teens for touchdown passes. And the second year, he had 20 or so. And this year, he had 30 or so passing, 45 total. Look at their attributes and characteristics. Very similar. Both big, both can run, both have big arms. Josh Allen has just developed better than Mitch Trubisky, but Mitch is not physical. It's all mental and how he's being utilized. So I would probably start by going to Chicago and Mitch.
The part that concerns me with the Josh Allen thing is that every crappy coach or even crappy quarterback in the next 3-4 years, every time they bust, they're going to say, well, we got to give him 3 years because look at Josh Allen.
This is when I propose to fans, it's hard to deduce who's good and who's bad. Yeah. Because I'll be real with you. If you were to send Josh Allen to an organization like the Jets, he'd be on somebody's practice squad right now. If he was at a bad organization, he'd probably be like Josh Rosen. But instead, he goes to a good organization, good coach, and look at what he's done.
That's why this coaching cycle is so amazing, is because Deshaun Watson, organizations like that, Justin Herbert, those organizations have the chance to write that path. And I think that is why it's so crucial. It's going to be fascinating to watch. All right, let's go to the newspaper here. $6,500 cash every week. Legal, ethical, exciting, and fun. I think that anybody who's ever called or gone to these websites, this is like the last thing you do on earth, right?
Yo, I have a scam story.
Wait, what did you get scammed on?
My rookie year, I'm in Cleveland with the Browns. Remember, I'm coming from Texas. Texas, you're used to space, you're used to land. So I'm looking for a house to live after I realize I'm going to be on the team that season because I'm on injured reserve. And I see this person that reaches out to me. Hey, we're missionaries in Africa. Our house is currently available. Just send us a $6,500 security deposit plus the last month's rent of another like $6,000, and we'll send you back the keys. This house it's amazing, and it's only this amount of money. Like, of course I'll do it. Then the player engagement director at the time was like, Acho, I hate to break this to you. Like, this is a scam.
So did you give them any money?
Heck no. Because I told my player engagement director about it. And before I could get too excited, she told me, like, they're scamming you.
What it sounds like, Emmanuel. So coaching staff, not great in 2012 Browns. Front office, not great. Player engagement director. That was the elite part of the 2012 Browns.
Look, Lindsay Spieler, she looked out for the kid.
Who do you think did the best job in the last week, Manuel?
I could either go low-hanging fruit and say Tom Brady because he crushed it against the Falcons. I could go a little higher-hanging fruit and say Steph Curry because everybody was sleeping on him and then he dropped 62. I could go highest-hanging fruit and say James Harden. He came out, week one and gave us game one and gave us 44 and 17.
Do you think that Steph was slandered into becoming an elite player again?
He was slandered awake. That's what it was. It was like, don't poke the bear. He was slandered into waking up and realizing, what are y'all even talking about?
Emmanuel Acho, buy his book, watch his show. Thanks for coming by.
Kevin, thanks for having me, brother.